Hi and welcome to the Evil Sheep channel. My name is Stephen Mather, your host on the Cults on Film podcast. This is a podcast that explores the cult phenomena through the lens of film and TV. Today I'm talking about the 1996 film Star Trek First Contact, directed by Jonathan Frakes, who also stars as Commander Will Riker and Patrick Stewart as Captain Jean-Luc Picard. This was the second movie featuring the crew of the Star Trek Next Generation. So the story features one of Star Trek's most recognisable baddies, the Borg, a cyborg race who expand across the galaxy, assimilating whole peoples and cultures. Now, the Borg had already been introduced to Star Trek fans during the TV series, so the appearance of a Borg cube, the distinctive shape of the spaceship approaching Earth, was understood by audiences to be an undeniably bad thing. But the Borg were not interested in a direct confrontation. Sneakily, their plan was to go back in time and disrupt humanity's history so as to inhibit their development of warp technology and their meeting with the Vulcans, leaving them easy pickings for Borg conquest. So I'm going to get to the cult bit in a moment, but the crew of the Enterprise are the only ones who can hitch a ride on the Borg ship's temporal wake, and they follow them down to Earth to 2063, a few years after the Third World War and nuclear holocaust, which is part of Star Trek lore. Okay, so what's this got to do with cults? Well, it's easy to see the Borg as a metaphor of cults and coercive control. They're linked to a hive mind. Each Borg has lost its individuality, subsumed by the collective. It no longer concerns itself with its individual body. It has no ambition, no thirst for individual experience or for personal pleasure, no fear of individual death, no need for development. Looking into the eye of a Borg is like peering into a portal to an existence without personal autonomy or even the need for it. What's so terrifying about the Borg is that each member of the collective, each being, was once an individual, assimilated from thousands of different galactic races. Each individual node was once a humanoid with hopes and dreams, worries and insecurities. Before they were assimilated, they had their own culture, their own way of doing things. Each member of the Borg collective would have been born with its family, have had friends, maybe they'd fallen in love, maybe they had their heart broken, they'll have regretted something that they did or said, and they will have achieved something for which they were proud. So it's no surprise that many ex-cult members talk about their former group or religion as the Borg. The parallels are stunningly clear. To varying degrees, depending upon the group, members experience a sort of assimilation process into the collective, the cult. The Borg assimilation process is of course violent, with tubes being inserted into the flesh containing millions of nanites, microscopic machines that enter the body and rapidly transform the individual, reshaping them both physically and mentally. Now, while not as brutal for most cult members, assimilation there can be a painful and difficult process. However, unlike the Borg assimilation process, the initial phases of cult recruitment are normally seen as quite pleasurable and enjoyable. Of course, there's no love bombing in the Borg, but there is in cults, where people start to feel like they've found a family, they've found something that they want to be a part of. However, within a fairly short time, uncomfortable truths may start to be revealed about what one must believe, accept and do in order to become part of the group and stay in good standing. The ideas and the doctrines get under the skin and begin to rewrite the individual's thinking. The need to separate oneself from former friends and family is often, if not demanded, sometimes it is demanded, but at least it's strongly encouraged. The ditching of cultural practices is also part of this assimilation process. The recruit may stop celebrating cultural holidays and festivals. They reduce and then stop associating with former friends, missing important moments, not turning up to celebrate a birthday or a christening. So the newly assimilated person may also start to look different. They might dress differently. Any distinguishing styles of dress or personal preference start to disappear. Long hair on a man gets cut neatly. He shaves off his scruffy beard, or maybe he's forced to grow a new one depending on the group. A woman's hemline starts to descend as her neckline ascends. Tattoos are covered up in shame. Or maybe a new type of clothing is required, one that completely sets the person apart from the rest of society. But it brands them as being part of the group. And talking of branding, maybe a physical and permanent mark is required as a way to identify the individual as one of the group. Individuality is therefore sacrificed to fit in with the rest of the group, and this forms as a symbol of submission and commitment. Now, this process can be distressing for former friends and family as they observe the person they know getting subsumed into a collective and becoming someone they just don't recognise. Maybe not all of the changes are bad, but they begin to transform the individual into something unrecognisable. In First Contact, Captain Picard fights the Borg's attempt to take over the Enterprise. He appears merciless as he cuts down former members of his own crew, who are now part of the collective, much to the horror of his companion Lily. Picard's fury, Lily realises, is because he himself was a member, or is a former member. He had also been assimilated, but through the extraordinary efforts of his crew had been recovered and brought back to his former self. In what seems like a contradictory argument with Lily as she questions his brutality, Picard claims that he's doing them a service, that they're gone. This is an act of mercy. Leaving a high control or coercive or cultic group is difficult. Anger is a very real part of the process. At the beginning of the movie, we see how Picard suffers from nightmares about his time with the Borg, including what he did as part of the collective. And this too can be a source of anger and regret for ex-members. For instance, having brought someone along, introduced them to the group, being responsible for their recruitment can induce wrenching feelings of remorse leading to anger. And a need to attack the former group is completely understandable and to some degree might serve a purpose. Picard's insights and knowledge of the Borg collective provides useful intelligence and gives him an edge, but as Lily implies, the line between revenge and legitimate anger can be a fine one. I'm going to take a slight detour from the movie for a moment and just dip into the TV series Star Trek Voyager. There's a Borg in that series called 7 of 9 Tertiary Adjunctive Unimatrix 01. We just call her 7 of 9 for short. She's captured by the crew and separated from the collective. At first, she is beside herself with fear and confusion. Gone are those reassuring voices she used to hear in her head. Gone is her purpose in life, to seek perfection through assimilation. And gone is a sense of a social self. Sure, one entirely defined by the collective, but she misses it. Her disorientation is such that she still refers to herself as we and us. Why are you holding us captive? We need to be released. For many cult members, their sense of individuality is so compromised that they seem unable to express their own thoughts and ideas after they leave. They repeat the phrases programmed into them, often acting as thought-stopping mechanisms. Seven's story arc throughout the series and into the new Star Trek series Picard is about her journey out of that collective and her discovery that she is an individual and finding out who that individual is. Seven was also assimilated as a very young child, which addresses another interesting cult question relating to the recovery of born-ins or members raised as children within the group. When Picard was rescued from the Borg collective, he had a strong identity and a true sense of self to return to. After all, he's Captain Picard of the Starship Enterprise. Seven's journey is arguably much harder as she struggles to come to terms with who she is, including what her values are, even her sexuality. Who is she? Okay, so back to Star Trek First Contact. The finale wraps up the two parts of the story, with Commander Riker and his team ensuring the timeline stays pure by supporting Zephram Cochrane in his faster-than-light warp speed test, and Picard and Data deal with the Borg Queen. So the Borg Queen is analogous to the leadership of the cult. Despite her words about the collective and the stated philosophy about removal of weak individuality, there is still an individual at the heart of the project. And she is willing to sacrifice individual Borg to further her own ends. Her pious words about the collective and the search for perfection are revealed to be nothing more than hollow rhetoric as she tries to further her own ends by recruiting a highly prized target, Lieutenant Commander Data, and also later as she desperately tries to hang on to life. Ultimately, she's not as fearsome a figure as we had once believed. Her defeat comes just as many other cult leaders does, pathetically, and with the sadness of the observer, a shake of the head and words close to pity as Data stands over her remains, once a unique and powerful enemy. So thank you for listening to this episode of Cults on Film. Don't forget to subscribe to the Evil Sheep channel for this type of content and lots of others. See you. Bye for now.